Philip Goodchild, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
You say that money has replaced God. What do you mean by that?
Well, we have to think about what role God played in society in the past, and there have been centuries in which it was unthinkable that you could have a society without some kind of religion holding it together. So the first thing that it gives is a basis for trust and cooperation. If you believe that you're going to be judged by God, if you think that God's looking at you, if you think that that there is a proper way to behave that is given by God, then you are going to be trustworthy. And if you're given instructions on cooperating with other people, then the whole basis of forming a society through trust and cooperation is set up by God. And we have societies that don't need God to play this role anymore. But there's a second factor. Religion is, it provides not only morality, not only a set of instructions on how to live, but also a form of aspiration. So you can aim towards spirituality. You can aim towards being the most holy person you can. You can aim to be the most devout person or close to God. And so this becomes almost a kind of competitive process, but at least it sets out a way of striving, a way in which people can coordinate their efforts together. And lastly, religion provides a big picture, an account of our place in the universe and a way of weighing things up, how they fit in within that big picture. So although we have a world in which many people have a religious belief and many people do not, we do have a world that is not united largely by forms of religious belief. Because even within religious traditions, there are sharp distinctions and people are suspicious of each other across different denominations or sects or varieties of their tradition. So even when religious devotion is still very much in play, what we have when people leave the mosque or the church and go about their daily lives is something else. We have a different way of coordinating our behavior. We have a different way of organizing our trust and cooperation. And we have a different way of organizing our aspirations. And we have a different way of making sense of reality and judging what things are real, how things make sense. And money plays a role in all of these things. And it's really strange because money is just this human construct. You know, people print coins, they dig out the metals and they mine them and they print them and they put some symbol on them. And then people trust that has value. And perhaps one of the earliest reasons why they trusted coins of value is because some tyrant was asking for them back in terms of taxation. So they would issue them, and this goes back to the 6th century before the Common Era. They would issue them to their the people who fight for them. And these people who fight for them would then go out and distribute them by spending them. And the only reason why people would accept them, give them food and shelter or whatever they wanted, is because they knew at some point in the future that it was going to be asked of them to pay back these coins. So everyone had to get coins in order to pay them back. So money starts off in this kind of coinage, at least. There's earlier forms of debt and things. But coinage starts off within this kind of framework, this sort of circuit. And of course, there have been massive changes since then with paper money and simply bank records and now cryptocurrencies. But in every case, we may not necessarily trust other people. We interact very much with strangers an awful lot of the time. And you and I have never met before this session, but we interact with strangers. And we judge a character immediately, and there's still all those traditional things are in play. But very often, not in this case, but very often, if we don't trust each other and can't trust each other, then we can at least trust the money we're paid. So money is something that we trust in, and we trust in it in the form of paper money because it's been issued by some bank that we trust, which in the UK is the Bank of England ultimately, and we trust that the Bank of England is both a very powerful institution and it's a solvent institution. It can afford to keep paying its way. And we trust that its primary motive is to maintain its integrity and so support the value of money. So actually, when we trust in money, we're trusting in the Bank of England, but we're also trusting that lots of other people we meet will also trust that money and therefore accept it in exchange. So actually, the Bank of England plays a hidden role in this, in that actually we're trusting the demand for money, that people want money. So we trust money because we demand it and we think other people demand it too. And that works in our experience. It doesn't change very much, though you do sometimes get currency devaluations or inflation or something like that. But we trust in money because that's our way of cooperating with strangers. And it's immensely powerful. We can do so much more through interacting in this way and relying on other people who have special skills or resources or expertise or the wherewithal to produce what we want. We can trust that they will do so and do so well because we live in this economic environment that I hesitate to describe as a market, because I think a market is a local place where you buy and sell goods. And a market is only made possible because there's money, because you don't really have barter markets. They've never really existed historically in much of a significant way. Yeah, there have been relations of barter, but barter tends to happen when it does happen, when money goes scarce or gets devalued, and then you've just got to find some way of cooperating the way that you used to with other people. So you turn to barter. But there have been other forms of redistribution in terms of gift exchange or tribute, and in the past historically. So we have a system that looks a bit like a market. But why I insist it's not a market is that when you try to model a market, what's crucial is the exchange relationship. So I have something, some kind of store of value like money. You have some good or service I want. We agree a price, we exchange it, I hand over my money, etc., etc. And that looks like a market relationship. But what happens in contemporary economic life involves that some of the time. That's part of the equation. But there's also contracts. Okay. And contracts endure over time. So the difference is between an instantaneous exchange and an exchange that takes some time to fulfill. Okay. And what makes this different here is that when I go to a marketplace and browse the stalls and spend a bit of money, I'm ultimately quite free in what I spend my money on. My behavior, so long as I have money to spend, is not restricted from without. It's restricted by the options in the marketplace, but there's no restrictions upon me. So money, we think about freedom very often in terms of the position of someone who has money to spend, what they're going to do with it. They might invest it, they might give it away, they might go for a great meal, they might buy some expensive kit or what have you, and go on holiday. It all seems to be a free choice. But that freedom is made possible by being in the position of having money to spend. But you get in the position of having money to spend by, first of all, doing something for someone else. And that, for most of us, involves paid employment. Yeah. And that is a contractual obligation that endures over time, often very long periods of time, in which, as an employee, you are not free. As an employee, you might have made your choice to sign your employment contract, but you have to fulfill certain minimal expectations of your role in order to stay in employment. So the relationship with money we have is not only one of being a possessor, we're also people who need money. We can only participate in wider life by getting access to money or relying on people who do get access to money. So we need money. And that means that this need for money controls us, and it starts to control how we see things. We see things in terms of what are the opportunities here? How can this help build my career? How can this help get me more money in the future? Is this some kind of good investment? So we see things in that sort of way, and it starts to color our perception of things. It also becomes a mode of aspiration because we have an image of the good life, which is one where we have a very high degree of freedom. And that freedom might be to go wherever you want, whenever you want, to go to the right parties or shows or events or et cetera, et cetera. And it then becomes this object of aspiration. People want to become wealthy, and they want to become as wealthy as they can. They might eventually get to the point where they think, okay, I've done enough now. Now I want to live out the good life, the retirement life or whatever. And not everyone keeps searching for money. But it does give our society structure and shape and aspiration because we've got something in common. And so in terms of the what's talked about politically, in terms of how well the nation is doing, we don't look primarily at measures of health. We don't look primarily at measures of happiness, that became a bit fashionable a few years ago.
Yeah.
We look at gross domestic product, which is just a measure, not really of how wealthy people are, but of how much economic activity is going on, how much money is changing hands. And so at both an individual and collective level, this aspiration for money helps to serve the increased activity that leads to gross domestic product and leads to more opportunities for other people then to gain money. And it becomes a kind of united system. So people can trust and cooperate with each other because they're all engaged in the same kind of activity. And it's an activity that imposes a particular kind of worldview upon you, where you're looking at everything in terms of its price, its opportunity, its value for money, etc., etc. And the other thing that I'd say about this is that whereas we tend to think about money primarily, you have this image of it as something in an account somewhere, or a few notes in your pocket, it used to be, or ability, your phone app is working and you can spend from your phone app or your card or what have you. This is what it is to have money, but the monetary relationship that tends to form what happens in life is one of credit and debt.
Okay.
So people will invest. They'll have money to invest, and that invested money is expected to be returned at a profit.
Okay.
So whether we're talking about equities, shares, or we're talking about bonds, which are formalized loans to big corporations or governments, or other forms of financial investment, they're all a kind of credit-debt relationship in which one side is the creditor and one side is the debtor. So if I take out a mortgage, say, because I want the home, so I have a home, I have a mortgage, and in order to do that, I don't have the large sum of money saved up to get me that home in the first place. So I need to borrow it, which means ever after, for the next number of years during the repayment period, I am indebted. And although I'm quite free to do what I want with my home and my life, I have to arrange my home and my life so that I can continue to make my mortgage payments.
Yeah.
And this means that money is just as much a form of social control as it is a form of freedom. So you have freedom when you're investing, although you probably have limited ideas of options, because we don't have a big discourse around the ethics of investment and what are the really good things to invest in and how to invest well. That's
by the time something becomes a good investment, it's probably not a good investment anymore.
Exactly, yes. So you're in a kind of competitive marketplace where the quick returns are already priced in and no longer quick returns once they get known. So we have that relationship of credit. We also have the relationship to money of the bit that we've got at the moment that we can spend, our spending resources. But we also have this relationship of debt. And as we're well aware from news reports, the thing about debt is it seems to just keep growing. Government debts, they're absolutely enormous. And we hear about the United States and France in particular recently, and the UK as well, and whether the government debts will cross some kind of threshold where they're out of control and lead to some kind of doom loop. But also, even businesses are funded by a combination of, the large corporations are funded by a combination of equity and bonds, a combination of money that people have put aside into shares. And of course, those shares can go up and down in value, but the company owes a dividend for those. But it also would then undertake a certain amount of borrowing to invest in order then to expand and grow and build new markets and then return on the investment. So we have governments in debt, corporations in debt, people who take out mortgages and credit cards and personal car payment loans, etc., in debt. And what we have then is a society in which institutions and individuals are quite tightly controlled. They've given a lot of freedom in how they go about meeting their obligations, but their obligations are there and they're continually growing and intensifying, so that we see this very much in generational terms in, say, the housing market, for example, that there's a certain generation that have paid off their mortgages, they own their own property, they've saved up pensions, they've got the freedom and the resources to spend, and they might some of them, although this is becoming less profitable now and corporations are taking over, but some of them might invest in the private housing market. That is, they buy another home, they let it out so that people pay rent to them, and the people paying rent, this is a transfer of wealth from one generation to another through an activity that is not itself productive or generating wealth for anyone else. So this is what the economists traditionally, like back to Adam Smith, would have called rent seeking. It's a kind of rent seeking behavior.
Okay.
So this is the other way in which people make money, and in fact, I think way in which most people make most of their money in who are wealthy in an economy like ours, the way it's evolved. And this used to be the case, but people have a combination of, they might earn a certain large amount, they might not earn a lot. But they also, some people are engaged in rent seeking, whereas other people are engaged in paying rent. And you get that wealth transfer. So you get a system whereby the elderly or the retired, they don't have to work, they've got their pensions, but it's as though the younger generation are effectively servants for them, so that they're the ones that I see out and about in restaurants and in pubs and having meals out and in places where you spend money, are the retired generation. The people I see working, serving them at the tables or in the kitchen, are the younger generation. And so we have something a bit like the traditional class system whereby the upper middle classes and the wealthy would live in these huge homes and have domestic servants. What we have is just a much more efficient thing where you're not buying a servant who's going to live in your house 7 days a week.
Yeah.
You're buying someone who's going to cook your meal and wait on your table just when you need it, and otherwise you don't need them. But it's a very similar kind of relationship. I suppose I need to come back to the question of religion.
Yeah.
So the reason why I say God has replaced money has replaced God, is because, and this started, I think, primarily in England, is the financial revolution back at the beginning of the 18th century, when paper money was widely used and it was the only way out of a financial crisis or a lack of coinage. So it starts around 1697, just after founding the Bank of England. What you have is a society in which there wasn't enough coinage, there was a lot of exchange, a lot of contractual relationships, and they were all done on credit, in the sense of, I haven't got the money right now, but I'll pay you within the next couple of months or next couple of years.
It's like an IOU.
Yeah. But a lot of it was actually not written down, it was verbal. It's strange. But it might well involve a witness. Of course, if your witness dies, there's a problem. It was cumbersome, and there were an awful lot of court cases, an enormous number, and a lot of them never quite reached court, because people were trying to get money out of people. But you have this deeply interconnected society where lots of people owe money to lots of people, and unlike our inequality now, where one class is serving, or one generation serving another, this is spread quite, and not totally evenly, but it's spread across the population. And it means that if one of your relatives gets into trouble and you bail them out, and you have to borrow a bit more from others to bail them out, and then they get into more trouble, perhaps it's terrible misfortune, or perhaps they're just lazy or a bit dissolute, or anyway, whatever it is, it means that you get into trouble, and all the people you owe are also getting into trouble. So you have this huge interdependency and a huge fragility. And we have this is the kind of the precursor. We still have it in the contemporary world with financial crises, where some institution gets into trouble, and then it's contagious, and everyone else is panicking, and there's a whole lot of distrust, and value goes down.
So it's this perpetual negative spiral down.
Yes, yeah, and it's easy to explain the downward spiral. It's hard to explain how it stops at some point, where it reaches the bottom, and it does. It's fascinating. Anyway, what you had is that kind of society where there was. It was a religious society. It was a puritanical. Everyone engaged with other people on the basis of, how much do I trust you? What's your reputation like? If you're doing business with someone new you haven't encountered before, you ask around. If you're negotiating some kind of contract with someone, you chat to them for hours, and you discuss all sorts of religious matters. This is what happened, and it's such a different world, the world we live in now. But this is what happened, and eventually you make some kind of commitment. But this happened in a time when there was coinage in circulation, but the coinage was, a lot of it's very old, a lot of it's quite worn, a lot of it was clipped. A lot of it people wouldn't really trust and think, well, that's not really a true piece of sterling silver, etc., etc.
How would they be able to tell if it was or wasn't?
Because it looked worn out. It looked, the edges had gone. You could weigh it and feel it's underweight. There were all sorts of ways of telling it. So in those days, it was quite rare to keep account books, even if you're a business person. Because what would you record? There wouldn't be, either money that comes in is all uneven. It's all different to each other. Some of it's good, some of it's not so good. So you don't have people using account books. When you do have coins, though, you would save them up for the really important occasion. So if you're a business person and you're getting some big shipment in from overseas, you make sure you've got the coinage to pay for it. Or if you've got to pay some big tax bill, you've got the coinage to pay for it. Or even if you're paying your rent or something like that, there were certain things that were of the highest priority that they get paid, and people would save up their coins for that, so that they would, although they might have coins in there stored away, they might not use them, and they might engage in credit relations for their day-to-day stuff and saying, okay, add that to my tab, I'll pay you for my bread at the end of the year, or what have you. So you have this strange situation where everyone's dependent on everyone else. Everyone's distrusting everyone else. There's no real standard for payments. There's a shortage of coinage, which leads by a positive feedback loop to more of a shortage of coinage because people are hoarding it. And then someone has the bright idea, there's a guy called William Potter, who was an alchemist, by the way, of setting up a kind of land bank that then issued paper money. And although it wasn't a land bank that ultimately the Bank of England was modelled on, it's the Bank of England that fulfilled this role, so that the basis on which the Bank of England holds value is it was just a group of rich people who lent 1.2 million to the king to fight King William of Orange, to fight his wars of religion. And he promised to repay at 8%, good rate of interest. Yeah. It was a permanent loan. It would never be repaid. So you put your money into this, you've got 8% for life coming back.
Yeah.
And because the monarchy was trusted to remain the monarchy, despite the Glorious Revolution, it was still trusted to remain the monarchy, and would have the ability to raise funds through taxation. You had a reliable source of income. So being an investor in that meant that this institution had money continually coming in, and it was going to be a solid, reliable institution. So it could issue paper notes, fiat money, that it would promise to redeem, but it didn't have to keep the gold in store to redeem these paper notes, because once they were accepted as valuable to doing business with, then people wouldn't present them for circulation anymore. And
surely there must have been some pushback to switching to paper money, because previously you had these coins which had this perceived value around them, and it's this physical thing versus something like paper. We all understand that if you were to take a piece of gold, for example, versus a piece of paper, there's this vast difference between the two in terms of value.
Yes.
So switching from these physical coins, which people had hoarded up, to something that could just be printed, there must have been this huge drawback to it.
There was a pushback. There were attempts to undermine the Bank of England in the first decade or two. It was a bit touch and go, as it seems, and the pushback is still going on now. And you can still see YouTube videos about saying fiat currency in the United States doesn't really mean anything. You should invest in gold. I also think that gold is a fiat currency because it has no intrinsic value. People like it for jewelry. I think, but it doesn't have an intrinsic value.
If it's difficult to attain, then it gets value. Like diamond, for example. Diamond is valuable because the process to getting diamond is so incredibly difficult. So it's scarce. So scarcity would drive that value, surely.
Oh, it doesn't drive the value unless it's in demand in the first place. So cesium is probably pretty scarce, but we don't know and really want cesium. I don't know. It might be really expensive. I had to think of some rare metal, but but it's because gold has been used historically for jewelry and has been a symbol of status. Yeah. For before that, it's always had a purely social value. So slightly different to silver, which at least we can use in certain industrial processes, and there are all sorts of industrial uses for it. But even today, the thing about gold is, well, two things. One is it's useless, but another thing is it's non-reactive, which means that chemically it doesn't degrade. It just lasts, like platinum as well. These precious metals just last, which means that if you have gold, it'll stay gold.
Yeah.
Whereas your silver, you have to keep burnishing every so often.
Yeah, so it retains its value.
So it retains its value, but there's no intrinsic value to gold. It's not like the intrinsic value of a house that you can live in or some crop that you can feed people with. It's a symbolic value. So it's a socially constructed value in the first place. And then you get the supply and demand curve on top of that. So when there's loads of gold around, it's not especially valuable. So when the Spanish brought in loads of silver and gold from discoveries in the Americas in the conquest of the New World back in the 17th century, they quickly spent it all and distributed it all. And I can't remember, I think a lot of it might have ended up in China or somewhere.
It was.
But the Spanish ended up no richer than before once it had been and gone. It was just a brief, they spent a certain amount on English wool, and that made Britain more wealthy. But but there's still a lot of bullionists around who think that the intrinsic value of money should be right there in its metal. Whereas I think even with that's a socially constructed thing. It's not a lot different to fiat currency. But going back to paper money, the proof is really in its usage. If there are some people who are using it, then it's worth having. That if you believe you can take it to a bank and get it changed, then you don't need to take it to the bank and get it changed, because someone else will believe they can take it to the bank and get it changed.
What do you mean?
So the Bank of England promises to pay on demand the sum of, not specified how or what form, but the sum of £20 for a £20 note.
Okay.
And that's the basis of it is a promise. That's the basis of this currency, is holding a value, because there's a promise that you will get something of worth £20 for it. Often that's interpreted as another £20 note. Nowadays, that's what you'll get if you had. But there have been times and off and on throughout history where you could actually take it and get some gold.
Okay.
That was a possibility. And because you can take it and get some gold, and everyone believes you can take it and get some gold, it's so much more convenient to use the paper.
And then get some gold.
And then leave it to someone else to get the gold, who leave it to someone else. So it gets continually deferred.
Why are people deferring getting gold from it wasn't given the £20 for gold?
Because there's not much gold around. It's hard to make use of it. It can easily get stolen.
So it's just more convenient.
It's much more convenient to have paper, but it's also it can quickly be made more available, so that the paper people offer paper because there's not much gold around. And if you trust that the paper is as good as gold, you can take the paper in place of gold. And this leads to an enormous transformation of society, which in my view can hardly be overstated. What you have in the 1690s is still a very pious society in England, where everyone's watching each other, everyone's commenting on everyone else's morals, and conduct, and this continues. But by the mid 1700s, suddenly the vast majority of people with wealth are investing in a get-rich-quick scheme.
Yeah,
the South Sea bubble. And even people like Isaac Newton, who was the master of the mint, who could see through it and could see this was a speculative bubble. Even he was eventually persuaded to join at the top of the market, which might be like investing in the big 7 shares now in the US stock market. He joined it somewhere near the top and lost loads of money when the whole thing collapsed, even though he knew it was a speculative bubble, because he thought, because they weren't used to it. But the only previous example really in history being the Dutch tulip fiasco several decades before. So, this makes a massive transformation in society, because now the difference between paper money and coins is that paper money is all the same. Yeah, it's an abstraction. It's a concept. It's just a promise. So you can actually start keeping account books. And also, if someone pays you in hard cash, whether that's coins or paper money, which is easier to do now because there's more of it around, they prove themselves to be the most honorable and trustworthy person because they have the resources to pay you in paper money. And so it actually fulfills the requirements of the old system in which people's integrity was the basis of their wealth, or their reputation, let's say, rather than integrity. That now the best way to maintain your reputation is to shift it on, to use the reputation of a bank instead. And then you participate in that and spending it. So in a system where everyone's dependent on everyone else, it's not necessarily a very nice system, but at least it's a kind of collective system. Everyone's in the same boat together. Whereas now the best way you can contribute to the common good in the early 1700s is to get hold of money and spend real money, whether coins or paper. And that makes it possible to pursue your enlightened self-interest in a way that you couldn't beforehand. So beforehand, yes, you could pursue your reputation, you could acquire a lot of material goods and assets, you could enjoy your luxuries, you can enjoy your finery, your wigs and powder and whatever they had in those days. But what you have now, ever since the financial revolution, is the possibility of pursuing a certain kind of good, which is profit, which is denominated in a clearly consistent unit of account, that becomes the means of exchange through which you're so honorable, you don't only just pay off all your debts, but you actually pay them. So you resolve them. And it's weird. It's that the morality and integrity and a sense of honor have now been crystallized into this paper construct that is the basis upon which people then live their lives, interact with each other, and make their deals with each other. And this means then that whereas religion was absolutely central in a society which worked primarily on trust and interdependence, we now have a different mode of trust and interdependence. It's still there, but it's mediated in a different way by money. So in the end, you don't even need the religion anymore. That's an optional extra for people who are into that sort of thing. That's what they can do on a Sunday or Saturday or Friday or whatever it is. That's not at the center of social life and political life. At the center of political life is this common aspiration to build the common good by building the wealth of the nation.
So previously, what had been the case when religion was the central foundation of society was that your reputation stood on how pure were you? What were your previous intentions? What was your reputation like? How were you viewed by God? Those sort of things. Were you a witch? Like things like that improved or ruined your reputation effectively.
Yes.
And it also meant that this gave you a standard to trust people by, because if you were someone who was seen well by God, who had a good reputation in society, or if someone who attended church fairly regularly, then you had this trust within everyone, because religion was the central thing. You all kind of assumed that someone was looking down on you. So even behind the doors, you were trying to maintain your reputation, even though no one else could see it. But there was this central structure of,
yes,
I'm being looked down and I need to have good deeds. I need to be trustworthy. I need to be a good person. But that trust has now been injected into this commodity, this paper.
Yes.
And
money is at once a commodity that we own, but it's also an economic system, like a market system that makes possible, in which we participate. So money holds value because we all participate in its value by buying and spending, working for it.
Yeah, there's this interesting idea. I think it's from the book 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Berkman. I might be wrong. It might be from Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. But anyways, it's this idea that we have these things that are network goods. So there's things like your mobile phone is a network good. It only has value when other people have it.
Yeah.
So if I was the only person to have like 8, 10 phones, but no one else had a phone, me having a phone has no value. It's only when it's given to other people, which then creates, it's the same thing with like followers. If no one had followers, you having 30,000 followers on social media and no one had Instagram accounts, it wouldn't matter because no one else sees value in it.
Yes.
So I think money is one of those things. It's this network good.
Yeah, it's a network good, and it is a kind of, as you say, it's a kind of, I call it a good of participation. It's the sort of good that only exists as far as we participate in it. And most of our institutions are like that. You couldn't have a university if people didn't invest in it as a university and treat it as a university and behave as though it's a university. And one person on their own, I could leave the University of Nottingham and try and be a wandering professor of some sort, but that would mean nothing. Yeah, that would mean nothing. Yes, hospitals, schools, corporations, businesses, they only exist insofar as people treat them as existing, living and working as though they exist, finding their meaning and purpose and shaping their time and activities in and through these institutions. They are great frameworks in which we live our lives. And of course, there's so many more of those around in the modern world than existed previously. But institutions they only exist as far as we participate in them. But there are a few things. The money is this really strange thing. So it seems to be on both sides. It's something that either I have or you have.
Okay.
If I give you some money or I spend some money, I don't have it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But money only holds value if we all believe money holds value and are willing to accept it. But the third thing about money is, so long as I appropriate it and hoard it and save it up under the mattress or in the bank account or wherever I save it up, I can imagine spending it. I can imagine how valuable it is. I can imagine how rich I am, but I don't experience anything being wealthy until I actually spend it. And when I spend it, it's not mine. Okay, I can invest it and hope that I'm going to get a return, but that again is just a kind of scorecard exercise. It has no intrinsic value apart from my self-esteem and my sense of how wealthy I am compared to other people. It doesn't really have any value. Money only has value not when you keep it, but when you spend it or invest it or give it away. It's the three things you can do with it, really.
Yeah.
So I think I would want to link it. There are certain things in life that only exist insofar as they're given away. That might seem a really strange idea, but what about my attention? I pay attention to different things throughout the day. There are all sorts of things trying to attract or control my attention. I try to keep freedom over my attention, distribute it as I see fit. So I feed my experience and life with what I pay attention to. You choose which podcasts you watch or listen to, etc., etc. So, but your attention, you have it by giving it.
Yes.
And the life that you experience is based on what you give your attention to. So the life I lead is the life I spend. And even if I spend my life concerned with myself primarily, I'm still spending it. And that then gives the quality of life that I have by spending it. So it's a strange thing. It's not an object that you possess. Time, attention, what you care about, that's always directed towards others. Love, obviously, that's directed towards others in more moral or higher, purer senses of love. Even time itself, time is given to us. We have a lifetime, but we only experience that lifetime by spending our time. And this seems to be at the basis of it, ontologically, to throw in a horrible philosophical word, but that is at the very basis of human experience, is that we don't decide when we're going to be born. We don't decide when we're going to die. We're kind of given in a position where we're not in control. We're given a particular time, a particular location, a particular family, a particular colleagues, people we associate with, people that we meet. And we have a certain degree of freedom over controlling that, but we also have certain limitations, and the world controls us as well and shapes our experience. But our time, the time that we have, is the time that we spend. And whether we're in control of how that's spent or other people control it, that then is the time that we live through. And the only time that we have in our lives is the time that we live through, which is the time that we spend. So I think at the heart of the human condition are what I call these goods of offering, things that only exist when we spend them. Our time, our lives, our attention, our care, our trust, and I would even put credit there, what we invest in and other people in terms of giving them the responsibility to care about what we care about. And that, for me, opens up a framework to a new philosophy, a new way of thinking about life and the human condition that is quite different to what dominates in the modern world. Because in the modern world, is based to a very significant extent on the knowledge that we can acquire, which is what we can, how we can gather evidence, how we can do experiments that are repeatable under laboratory conditions. But all this knowledge, our knowledge of history, our knowledge of biographies and personal events, all this knowledge is in a certain sense looking backwards on what has happened. Whether it's what's happened in a laboratory or what's happened to produce a whole barrage of evidence, or what's happened in someone's lives or in history. It's all looking backwards on what's happened. So we can know about life only in hindsight, only by looking back. And then we project to the future. But life has to be lived forwards. So whenever we make a decision to pay our attention to one podcast rather than another, to one thing rather than another, we're kind of taking a risk. We're stepping out. We don't know what we're going to encounter. There's no knowledge in advance. There might be a few clues or reviews or something like that. But there's no real knowledge in advance of what that experience is going to be for you. So we're perpetually investing ourselves in something that we don't know what the outcome will be. And that is an act of faith. So this is why I see credit and faith as at the heart of the human condition. And this, I think, religions have been concerned with faith is not at the center of all religions. It's definitely in Protestant Christianity at the center, and that tends to give us a focus. We start to call, habitually people call religions faiths, but a lot of religions don't primarily work on the basis of some kind of trust. They work on the basis of rituals or laws or certain way of organizing your time, some kind of disciplined practice of paying attention to things 5 times a day or whatever it is. You don't necessarily have to believe. You have to sort of accept you have to leave loads of different things. You just have to do it. Religions, that's how they work. And of course there are stories about gods or supernatural happenings or divine commandments, etc., and they are central, but they are part of the picture, which is a matter of determining time and attention and trust and care, what people care about. And this is, this goes to the heart of the question, which you asked at the outset: why do I claim that money has replaced religion in the modern world? How do we spend our time? Working for money. Or if not, we spend it entertaining ourselves by spending money in some way. Or only spending our attention. Yeah, thanks. How do we work out what's valuable in life, what we count as significant, what we make note of and what we record? We do it on the basis of either whether it's profitable, or we invent some artificial system of quantification by which we can measure achievements of certain objectives that we've set out arbitrarily, even though we don't really know exactly what they mean or how they work out in practice. So we copy the money system, even when we're not using the money system, in terms of trying to quantify everything as far as possible. We have the basis of trust and cooperation, which is in and through money. In all these ways, I think that the money system is not opposed to religion. In fact, being religious tends to make you someone who's good with money, who's conscientious, who will not break rules, who will do your duty, fulfill your obligations, make you a good employee, or it might make you highly motivated to make a large sum of money so that you can make a difference in the world and make it a much better place by spending it in the right way, giving it to your preferred charities or your mission charities or whatever it is. So you can be highly religious within this system. There's no competition. It's a strange religion which gives you some religion and money that gives you absolute freedom, and yet still controls you. Because the options that are available, the aspirations that are available, are laid out in advance. They're laid out by your debts, by your financial obligations, by your need to interact with others, and how that's enabled, made possible.
Earlier you laid an interesting idea about, with money, we're always kind of planning for the future.
Yes.
We're always looking ahead.
Yeah.
And I think to link to that idea of looking in retrospect, life makes sense. To add on to that, I think, it's easy to look back and string together a narrative of like, this is how I did something, and then this happened, and this allowed this to happen. This is the reason. But this idea that we're always looking ahead, what this could get me, how this could benefit me, and so on and so on. Do you think this makes us lose this level of presence in the now with this overly focus on what could be?
Yeah. I think one of the defining features of our time is that we lose direct awareness of reality. That there's a certain thing that's really basic, really simple. It's not hard. It sort of comes up in Buddhist mindfulness and just being in the present, here and now, paying attention to how reality is. Of course, it's a far more complex thing to then understand this strange, complex world that we live in and pay attention to that sort of reality. But whenever we shift from being in the present to trying to understand, we quickly shift to mediators, things that will help us understand things. They might be analogies or paradigms or stories or narratives or concepts or certain kind of information. And what's characteristic of our age is a very high level of mediation, which is, again, it's a horrible technical word, which means that I only get access to what I'm thinking about through the means of something else. So the really prominent version of this that's around in the world today is, when I was your age, we didn't have an internet.
Yeah.
We didn't have social media. If I wanted to communicate with other students at university or set up something, we had this odd system of pigeonholes, and you would go around. I went round to other colleges and had contacts and leave a note in their pigeonhole. Might knock on their door, but I was shy, so try to avoid that. But you just leave a note. If you couldn't find them, you leave a note, or it's much quicker instead of having a conversation. You can't WhatsApp them.
Yeah.
So you leave a note in a pigeonhole, and that's a form of mediation, a way of making it possible to interact with another person through a means, a little kind of note. But now we have a world in which a lot of people spend a very large amount of their day, whether it's work or leisure, looking at a screen.
Yeah.
And what we have on our screens is something that has been artificially produced. And it's been artificially produced for the sake of having a certain kind of effect or impact on the people who see it. So we live in this network that isn't simply a structural network or anonymous network or something like you could imagine, like some old-fashioned telephone exchange of all sorts of wires connecting to other wires, or it's not like an integrated circuit. We have a network in which people communicate for the sake of making some kind of effect or impact, or to get their likes or their followers, or to have some kind of influence. And the vast majority of what people encounter is artificially contrived in this way. You see it most definitely in television programs and films, because there you have actors and you have vast numbers of people involved in the production of something that never existed, but it looks at least like it existed. So that's one kind of it, particularly sort of fantasy films. That's one kind of extreme. But in our world of screens, everything is somehow a little bit of that nature. Even what I'm saying to you now is a conversation, and yet it's a conversation about things that I've been thinking about and exploring for the decades. But I'm saying it in though that people will learn something from it, or relate to it, or argue with it, or it provokes some kind of thinking or reaction in some kind of way. It's a kind of communication. So I'm not exempting myself from that. But a lot of what we experience through our screens is more artificially contrived. It might be some kind of video game. Might be some very artificial TikTok video. Something that really happened, but a little kind of snapshot that only works as a snapshot. Is not someone's life 24 hours a day. It's just this little bit where they do a cartwheel or whatever they do.
It's the highlight of their day. I think these modern constructions have given us a false sense of reality. And with that, I think we lose some ability to be good at things through that because of this convenience. A good example of this, when microphones started improving, you found that it reduced speaking ability. There's this really interesting study that's done on this, and that's because when microphones weren't as high level as they are now, like we have these Rode microphones here, you have these Rode microphones. These are good, and we speak and it will really capture our voices. But previously, when they didn't have this sort of technology, you really had to have diction and coherence in the way that you were speaking, which meant that voices had a lot more personality. It means that you actually had to get your voice out in order to get it caught in the microphone so that people could hear it well. But now, where technology has improved microphones, we don't need to have that coherence. We don't need to have that diction to be heard. So we found that people actually become a lot more monotone and mundane when they're speaking because there's not that much personality or diction or coherence in the way that they're speaking. And I think with a lot of other constructions, like we have, like for example, that idea of the money, right? Where previously we had religion as a way of trusting people, and that was the sense of society. Now we have money. We lose the sense of community in a way because we can become very individualistic. Whereas previously we didn't have that option because we had to speak to people. We had to have this sense of community because this improved our reputation. This allowed us to learn about other people's reputation. We don't need to do that now.
Yes.
Because money is this separate thing. Like it doesn't matter about speaking to other people because we could just do something and get money. And the more of that we have, the more trustworthy we seem, the better our reputation is. And this is actually being chased a lot more, especially in my generation. You know, there's this incredible survey that's been done, which says these are the salaries that Americans say that they consider as financially successful. And boomers say that about 99.9K and in dollars is successful for them. Millennials say $212,300 is successful for them. Gen Z say $587,800 is what they deem as successful, which then brings the average down to about 270,000. So this was a survey done of about 2,000 US adults, which was conducted last year around this time.
Yeah.
And you can see that there's this yearning for increased reputation, more money, in a very much more individualistic society.
Yes. Yes, I've not come across those figures before, and it's interesting to reflect on, but obviously we'd only be guessing at what's really behind it. And to some extent, there's a different level of experience. So there's also a different level of pressure. I'm guessing that if you've experienced a reasonable level of income, then you don't, and you're happy with that, then, and life hasn't been too hard for you, then you can put your estimate a lot lower than if it looks really hard to get started on the poverty ladder. You would need a really huge, if you're doing it only by salary and not by the bank of mum and dad or grandparents, to get on the property ladder, you do actually need a massive salary to get you started and to get you a decent property. You know, one thing, a place that you're going to feel proud to live in. Yeah, you might need $500,000 for all I know. So I can see what I'm trying to imagine what was behind that. And perhaps that does look like the hill that you would have to climb in order to be successful, and not just simply rely on the older generations to either die and pass on their property or to help you out.
Yeah. It's unfortunate for them because I think we've run out of time. There's so many things that I wish we could get into, but I can't keep a conversation this long. So hopefully, maybe if I have you on another time, we can speak about more things.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed this. You know so much. It's like I have to keep on track with what you're saying, or every single time you start something new. It was really interesting. I really appreciated the conversation.
Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Where can people go to see your work?
I'll see my work. Well, I see myself primarily as belonging to a print era. But if you really want to think about life, you can't simply do it. I'm not saying that there's some great ideas out there, but you need a much more prolonged, sustained reflection. So my published books are where I'd recommend people, and the one that made there's a few that made a big name for themselves, things like Theology of Money, but it's a bit that was set before the great financial crisis and was kind of predicting it, but didn't know quite how it was going to unfold. And there's more developed work in 3 volumes called Credit and Faith, which is about it's about the character of philosophy as well, but it's also about the strange interconnection between Christianity and economics and how that's evolved over time to make the modern world that we have now. And then I've got this other book, Economic Theology, that takes seriously the idea that money is the new religion, and then uses theological styles of analysis about exploring how people are investing in the future, how they're making the world that we live in by these investments, and how the economic beliefs of our age are completely self-contradictory and self-defeating, and have led to these multitude of crises that surround the contemporary world. So those are places, Credit, Faith, Economic Theology, really good places to go for my work.
Awesome. Philip Goodchild, ladies and gentlemen.